Right, so here we go. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, sometimes both the hirer and the borrower will have to bring a korban chatos, which we're going to translate as a sin offering. We'll keep that simple. Oh, second. Try to turn to the next page. Here we are. It should make that change. Okay, let's try this here. Share. Here we are. There. Okay. Can you all see the screen that I've got now? The Gemara?
It's coming up.
You got it?
Now. Yeah.
Okay, you see it says Pa'am Sheshneim Ba'asham at the top there?
Yep.
Great, lovely, super in business. Okay. Pa'am Sheshneim Ba'asham, sometimes both the hirer and the borrower have to bring an Asham offering, which is called a guilt offering. Sometimes the hirer brings a chatos, and the shoyel, the borrower, brings an osham. Sometimes the hirer brings an osham, and the borrower brings a chatos. So the Gemara is now going to unpack all of this just to speak it through in the simplest ways how exactly this works. And there's two different kinds of offering depending on what happens with an oath that you make. And the rule is that if you make an oath that is false, in certain circumstances, you have to bring an offering as an atonement for that when we had our temple. And there are two different kinds of offering depending on the impact of your oath. If your oath was just a false oath, then you bring a chatos. If your oath was going to deprive somebody of money that was owed to them, then you bring an asham. I'll say that again just to be absolutely clear. If you have an oath that is just false, but makes no financial difference to anybody else, you bring a chatos for that oath, that false oath. If you make an oath that is not only false, but actually deprives somebody else of money that they are owed, then you have to bring an asham offering. Both these offerings are referenced in Ezehu Makomon, the list of offerings that we speak through in a set of Mishnayos towards the end of the first section of the morning davening. So the Gemara is going to show you the different situations where different ones of these offerings might be brought. How does this go?
Rabbi,
yeah,
so you can explain how are these offerings brought, over what time period, and to whom, and what do the offerings consist of?
Brilliant. Okay, so this is all talked about in the Mishnah in Ezehu Makomon, which is towards the end of the very first section, before Boros Ha'omer, before even that first Kaddish. We have the morning brachos, then we have a couple of other prayers, and then we have Ezehu Makomon Zavachim. And it talks through the different things. Chatos Hatzibur Vayochid is the Chatos offering, and they would have to bring, I think it was a goat, and they would slaughter it on the northern side of the temple, and they would receive its blood there, and they would sprinkle its blood on the four, as it were, horns on the top of the outer altar in the temple courtyard. They would then pour the rest of the blood on the southern side of the altar. And then the kohanim, the priests, would eat the parts of the offering that were designated for them, which wasn't all of it, but some of it, within the temple precincts before the following morning. That was the
Rabbi, did you see in the news just after Yom Tov that a gentleman was carrying a sheep up to where the temple would have been, and he wanted to slaughter. He wanted to have it as an offering, and he got arrested literally this morning.
Yeah, I can well believe it, because the rule is that the Talmud says that nowadays you can offer the Pesach offering even without being ritually pure. So there are those who say you can do it nowadays, and
Yeah.
they do this it's kind of political. I don't approve, because there are better ways to bring the divine presence into the world than exerting a right to bring an offering in a time when it is clearly going to cause tremendous tensions and risk lives. And it seems that the great rabbis of our time don't encourage this. They say that we should do what you and I are doing right now, which is learning Torah. That is the biggest way to bring peace to the world and bring divine presence down into the world. This is where the action is. It's not bring offerings on Temple Mount. So yeah, people do that, and I'm sure they have their reasons, and I'm not gonna condemn them from the pulpit, but there's a reason why I don't do it. I think we have bigger fish to fry within the pages of our Talmud. This is where the action is. This is the real thing to do. Okay, so there we are. Okay.
And he was a little bit sheepish anyway when he got caught.
I'm sure he was. Okay.
Colin, I love your one-liners. They're magical.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so the Gemara now unpacks this. Kate said, how does this work? So we're 3 lines down on new page 36a. Kate, how does it go? Piras Momen Oshom. If a false oath entails denial of money that is actually rightfully owed, then you have to bring an Oshom offering, which is slightly different to the Chatos one. Instead of the blood going on the 4 points of the altar, it goes on all 4 sides, and it is thrown at 2 opposite corners of the altar, so that when the blood hits the corner, it goes on both sides. It sort of diverges along the 2 sides of the altar. Yeah, and it's also part of it is eaten by the priest. Okay, so again, kfiros momen osham, denial of money entails an osham offering. Bitoy sefosayim chatos. If somebody merely says something in an oath that is false, but doesn't entail a defrauding of somebody else, then that'll be a chatos offering rather than an osham offering. Okay, so the Gemara then says, how will this work? Well, there's 4 lines down here, last one on the line. Sometimes they both bring a chatos offering. For example, where it's the same case where somebody hired a cow and then lent it for free to his friend. Imagine that the cow just died of natural causes. But Omrun, they said, Nensa, for some reason or other, which we don't even need to care about, they say that the cow got carried off by bandits. They made a false oath. And then they fess up and they say, you know what, we did the wrong thing. We lied on oath. Now we want to make amends. And the rule is they have to bring a chatos offering. So what do? Seicha, the beinkach uveinkach miftar poto, bechatos. The hirer of this cow is anyway not liable for what happened to the cow, because it died of natural causes, and he's not liable for that. So he has to bring a chatos, a sin offering, because he said something false. He said it was carried off by bandit when he just killed them and died. Shoel, the person who borrowed the cow from the hirer, the beinkach uveinkach yuvim echad, he's liable in any case when the animal dies of natural causes, because a borrower is liable for everything except when the borrowed thing dies or breaks as a result of the normal work that it does. In that case, even the borrower is exempt. But that's not what he's claiming. He's claiming it was carried off by bandits, for which he'd be liable. And in fact, what happened? It just killed over and died. Makes the difference. He's liable anyway. So he's also bechatos. He's also got to bring a chatos offering. Both of them bring a chatos because they both made a false oath. They deceived about the chain of events that led to the demise of this cow. One said it was carried off by bandits. One said that it just dropped over. Sorry, they both said that it was carried off by bandits when in fact it just keeled over and died. But in both cases, irrespective of that, if they both told the truth, it wouldn't have made any difference because the hirer is anyway exempt, even if he keels over and dies. The borrower is anyway liable, even if he keels over and dies. So when they both lied and said it was carried off by bandits, it made no difference to the original owner of the cow. The hirer is still exempt, the borrower is still liable. And now we come into the Rabbi Yossi argument, which is, do we regard the hirer as the representative of the owner when he lends it, such that the money for the disappeared borrowed cow goes to the owner? Or do we say no, that the hirer becomes, as it were, the new owner, such that the borrower is liable just to him? And that was Colin's point from last week about the fact that he got some liability, maybe makes him the owner. We dealt with that. So that's that. So that's the first clause in Rabbi Yirmiyah's case. Just a second.
Rabbi, is there any significance in the fact that the blood is being put one side and then, did you say dotted on the other side? Is there any significance in the way that is actually happening?
Yes, there absolutely is. Rav Hirsch talks about this at great length. He says that with the chatos, there is a focus on the fact that one needs to cling tightly to the heights of spiritual achievement, and that's why it goes on the points on the top of the altar.
Okay.
With an osham, there's a different focus. The sides are lower down on the altar, and you also have to pay back money that you defrauded plus a fifth. So, which he doesn't talk about, he's just talking about the offerings.
So there's a different level of spirituality if you, for the different reasons of why you had to take the oath. So if there's financial loss, it's seen as being, I don't know, less spiritual. Is that what you're saying?
So. I think, yeah. I think less is expected of you because
Okay.
you sinned in a more grievous way. You sinned to another person as well as to God.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's what it is. That's sort of back of a fact.
I've got to tell you, I think it's just absolutely fascinating.
Thank you. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. I like it too. Thank you. Okay, so next one. Here we are. Right. For Amish Shishneim Ba'asham, sometimes they both have to bring an Asham offering. That's both the hirer and the borrower. Good going. For example, the Gemara says, Shenignava, it was stolen. The Amru, and they both said, Mesom Machmas Malacha, it died in the course of its work. The Tarvaihu Kakafri Mamayna, both of them are denying money that they owe. The borrower says that, he said, it died because I put the yoke on its back. And when I did this, it had a terrible sort of straining look on it, and pulling the plow was obviously too much for it, and it died as a result of pulling the plow. Very strange, because that's what cows are meant to do, and the plow wasn't particularly heavy, but that's just what happened. And the borrower, were that to have actually happened, the borrower would be exempt. Likewise, the hirer says that this is what happened to it, that it died as a result of its work. And in fact, what really happened was that it was stolen. Now, the hirer is also liable for theft. So they're both denying that the theft took place, and they're denying something for which they're both liable.
But Rabbi, if the borrower received the cow in perfect condition,
Yeah.
and it looked all right. They'd just done a little twirl and a dance, came into the room, and everything seemed good. And suddenly he loaded it up to do the work. Gone.
Right.
Dropped down dead on the spot.
Right.
At that point, surely the borrower, although he's not responsible, it's in his care, and because it's in his care at the time, he has a responsibility to. So the onus is on him to prove that was the case, rather than to say, well, okay, it's that we don't know where he can't show it. If he's saying that we don't know, whether it died or whether it was stolen, if he can't show it, then surely he has to be responsible for its death.
Well, if he makes an oath that, let's say, it died in the course of its work,
Yeah.
then that's him off the hook. The oath is considered a proof.
Yes. But he can't show that. But he can't show it because
he doesn't need to. Once he makes an oath, that's it. He walks away. Then it's between him and his conscience.
But he wants to. I want to see it. I'd like to see it dead. I want to do an autopsy.
Tough. You can't. I made an oath. That's that. I'm free. That's how it works.
I don't believe your oath. Can I question an oath? Is the question I'm asking.
You can question it, but if I have a good character thus far, then you're obliged to accept my oath.
And if I do want to question your oath, who do I question it through?
The Beis Din. You say to them.
So I go to the Beis Din and I say, I like this man. He's a very nice man. He seems to be okay. I don't know him that well. Okay, he's not a regular person that I know. I'd like to see that. He's made an oath that it died. And if it's true, he would have no problem with me seeing it. It's only across the road. It's only in Edgewood Lane. So what is the problem with me walking over there?
You have no right to enter my premises to verify my oath. No.
Then I want my money.
No. I made an oath. That's that. Torah says I'm exempt. Once I made an oath, I go free. That's it. So,
but I've made an oath that my cow was in perfect condition. He did 3 laps of Edgewood Park before I lent him to you. At excessive speed.
I believe you, and we all believe you about that. And the borrower says, or the hirer says, I don't know what happened. It's crazy, ridiculous. There it was, loaded up like I load a penny cow, and I've seen it pulling the plow many times in your field, put it in my field, load it up just like you did, and said, giddy up, slapped its haunch, and it just dropped dead. It pulled the plow and it dropped dead. I don't understand.
The point I see what you're saying, but the point I'm sort of leading to, in a sense, is that if you go into a court of law, let's just say that we used to Beis Din, but you can use any court of law. You go in there and you say, I swear, or I might go, everything I say shall be the truth and nothing but the truth. If that was the case in these times, there was no need to have a ruling, no need to have a court, because people go in and say, I'm going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and then lie for the next half an hour. So why would you have a Beis Din? If he said it, it's done, it's finished. So is there no look at the character of the person making this?
There absolutely is. Yes, you're right. So if this guy is a scoundrel and he's made false oaths before, or he's a thief or whatever, the Beis Din may in the past have chosen to blacklist him and his oaths. You're quite right. And there are various disqualifications for this sort of thing. There are even disqualifications for being a witness. If somebody's a professional gambler, they're not allowed to witness. You're quite right. So not anybody can take an oath.
Right.
But if you were hiring an animal for work, right?
Yeah.
Once you test it out beforehand to see if the animal, like a vet or something like that, to say, hang on a minute, I want to test it out because I want to be liable for it, and it falls down dead.
Yeah,
I
might well do that. Yeah, and presumably if he did that, then he did a sort of test drive of this cow, and it was absolutely fine. But you could knock me down with a feather. I just put the cow in the traces, and I slapped its thigh, and it dropped dead. It started pulling, and it dropped dead. What am I supposed to do? That's what happened. That's what he says anyway. But
that's what happened. The same thing happened to him 2 weeks ago. He had another cow, and the same thing happened.
It's a funny old world, isn't it? Maybe he's got radon in his field. I don't know. Goodness knows. And the bottom line is, Al Gemara says, we're talking about a case where he was lying, where in fact what happened was that this cow got stolen, and they both don't want to admit it to the original owner. So that each one. Yishai? Baruch Hashem, thank you. You will understand this most of all. I'm in the middle of a Gemara shir right now. Are you okay? Are you all right? I'm going to call you back when I'm done. All right. Thank you, though. Good to meet you. Speak soon. Bye bye. Bye bye. My little boy. Um. So the point is that this can wait. Okay. So he's lying, and yes, it is far-fetched because it's not even true. That's what's happening here. But what are we supposed to do? The Beis Din have to accept a shavua. They're obliged to. When they come to Beis Din and say we were lying, and now what do we do? Then we'll blacklist them.
Right.
But that's what the Torah says. The Torah says we trust people when they make an oath, at least in the first instance. But if they've got a long track record of being a bad person, then we'll not do that. Absolutely.
Right.
Rabbi, in throughout the last couple of years, you've said about how powerful it is to take an oath, and how really you would only do it in really circumstances that anything else was unavoidable.
Yeah.
So Colin's point about are there anyone can take an oath? You don't know about the integrity of the man who's done it. I'm really interested in that as well, because from adding on to Colin's point, that if you're saying that it's such a powerful thing and you should only really do it in particular circumstances, you'd think there would be some type of test or proviso or something that you would have to take before you had the ability to do it, because not everyone you'd think could or should be able to do that.
Right. So let me ask you another question. Imagine we're in shul and there's 9 people waiting. I'm popular today. 9 people in shul, and 9 men in shul. We're waiting for a minyan, and a stranger walks into shul, and he says, "Hi guys, I'm your 10th man. Do we test if he's Jewish? Do we look into his birth records? Check his mum's ksuva?"
Okay, but if you didn't know him,
Yeah.
And he's walked into shul, I don't know what would you do?
I'll tell you, we assume we do. Alex or Yitzchak, the guy who converted recently.
Yes.
So
yes.
he told me a story that he was in Chabad once, with his black hat and black kafel and tzitzis out and beard and the whole 9 yards, and they were waiting for a 10th man, and they made a phone call. Said, "Oh yeah, he's on his way. We're with us in just a second, so we'll find out." And he had to pipe up and say, "Actually, guys, I'm not Jewish."
Oh wow!
And they were gobsmacked because bless him, he's a really diamond guy, works very hard, and he looked the part, and they assumed entirely reasonably that when somebody walks into shul and says they're Jewish, we take them at their word.
Yeah,
I've davened in shuls in various places, and nobody's ever questioned whether I'm Jewish. They just assume.
No, in fact, you're completely right. I remember I was in Rome and in Paris when I went to a minyan, and there were 10 or 11 men there, and you just assume everyone in there's Jewish.
Exactly.
You don't know them from Adam.
Yeah, and
which is why
it's a lovely way to see the world. It's a halachic thing called the cheskas kashrus, which is our presumption is that everybody's okay. So we pride ourselves on our innocence and naivety, and we say, if we don't know you, we would assume you were good. We're not going to assume the worst of you. We would assume the best.
So you're saying with this oath, you're assuming that the man or woman who takes the oath are good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to finish that circle, I asked Rabbi Lily one morning when we were waiting to get into shul at 6:30 a.m. and we couldn't get through the gate and whatever. And I said and we were just chatting, and I said, "Rabbi, you look fantastic. You look the part. How do I really know you're Jewish? I mean, you forget all this." And he answered me very quickly. He said, "If I ask a question with a question, I'm Jewish."
But
It's
Well,
a
you know
very,
what?
very.
You remind me of the story I heard from Rabbi Leff, the guy, the rabbi who was reading Gemara in the football match that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago in Shul, and he told us that when he was in Miami, he was teaching in the school, and there was a child in the class he was teaching who was a convert, and one of the other children took umbrage at this and accused that child of being not properly Jewish. And Rabbi Leff was outraged at this, and rightly so. And he got all the class together and he read them the riot act, and he said the only person in this room who knows 100% they are Jewish is this child, because they have a based-in certificate to prove it. But anybody who's born Jewish, we can't be sure. How do we know? Well, we can't. Nobody knows that. And I've heard countless people say they've researched their family tree. How far back did they get? A couple of hundred years? Maybe the 1700s? Maybe. I've never heard somebody research their family tree back to the 1300s or the 1100s or the 800s. And yet that's how far our Jewish lineage stretches if we are born Jewish, and far beyond that as well. How do you know that the man whom the woman whom your ancestor from the 600s married was a Jewish woman? How do you know that?
Yeah, you don't.
We assume.
You assume.
So and the
But
only
really, you don't really know anything to a couple of hundred years ago. I mean, if you really think about it, in between when the Torah was written and all of everything we're learning here, there's a good 1,000 years, 12 in between when we don't really know.
More like two, because the Gemara was compiled 1,500 years ago, and the Mishnah 1,800 years ago. Yeah. So that's right. It's a vast stretch of time, and we can't be sure, but we have a chazaka. We have this presumption that this is how it is, and that's how it works. Unless you're a convert, in which case we know for sure.
I've never even thought about that before my whole life. I've assumed. I never thought about that.
You don't look Jewish, Alan.
No, lovely.
Can I ask a question? Just a quick question that I just wanted to try and get in a few weeks. 3 weeks ago, the Sedra that we did, it was about the counting. So you're not allowed to count Jews. So everyone gives a shekel or a half shekel as it is, and we get to that point.
Right.
Yet we count every single day 10 Jews for a minyan. So if you're not allowed to count Jews, how are you counting Jews 10 every day?
So halachically,
and I haven't meant to ask you that for 3 weeks.
Right, no, it's a very good question. Halachically, it means counting in a normal way, like 1, 2, 3. So the way we habitually count in Judaism, and I had this most of all with cheder trips, where I got maybe 20 or 30 kids, and I'm counting obsessively the entire time because it's so scary to take a bunch of kids out traveling, especially nowadays. And you have to be so careful. So we're counting all the time, and the way we do it is we don't count with numbers. We count with words. So, for example, there's a pasuk, which a famous pasuk we know from Simchas Torah, and that pasuk has 10 words. That's what Urim Nasim At Olam. So that pasuk has 10. So we use that pasuk to count up to 10.
Right.
And that's how I count the kids. Yes, and that's I said it over and over and over until I've counted everything I need to count. And that's how we do it. There was a big controversy when Rachel and I were living in Israel in the late 90s, because the Israeli government had a census of all the inhabitants of the land. And some people raised the question whether it's halachically acceptable, because they were effectively counting Jews. And the leniency that was promulgated was that because not everybody living in Israel is Jewish, it's a counting of Jews and non-Jews together, and that's allowed in Jewish law. It's specifically when you count Jews, not that. And I must finish with this. I remember when Reading Shul, our first community, celebrated their 100th anniversary must have been about it was the early 2000s, I think. The early 2000s. And Rachel and I went back for their 100th anniversary celebrations, and Chief Rabbi Sachs spoke. And it was Parashas Kisisa. It was where this rule comes in. And he said, why don't we count Jews? And he said, because in Judaism, in Jews, numbers don't count. It doesn't matter how many or how few you are. What matters is, are you attached to Torah? Are you doing the right thing? And if you are one person doing that in the whole world, and the entire Jewish world is against you, or the entire world is against you, have no fear. You can be in a minority of one. If you're doing the right thing, you're all right. And that's the deeper message of this counting. There are other
Right.
messages as well, but
I think, Rabbi, I think you need to stand for Prime Minister. We need a change of strategy at the moment, and I think you're the man.
Got my vote.
Alan, I thought you liked me. I didn't think you wished me any harm.
I love you. I don't lie. I love you. But we need some changes fast. I don't know how, because I love that philosophy. It's an interesting world we're living in.
It's not
Hashem's
me.
got some interesting plans at the moment.
Hasn't he just? But it's not me. It's Judith. I'm just, I'm just passing on what I've heard. That's all. Too bad. All righty. So let's make a touch more progress if we can. So again, if both the hirer and the borrower say that the thing was it died in the course of its work, that's something for which both of them would be exempt vis-a-vis the original owner, whereas in fact they are liable because the thing was stolen. So then they are both denying money that is due to the owner. They're defrauding. They are sorry. They're both denying money and they are liable for it. And they are trying to exempt themselves with this false oath. Therefore, they bring the Osham offering. Let's have a look at another case, just for fun. There's another case where the hirer is liable for a sin offering, a chatos. The Sherba Osham, and the borrower has to be a guilt offering, an Osham. Could go in, for example, it died just of natural causes. For Amrun, they said that it died because of its work, which is slightly different. Not just that it keeled over, but it keeled over as a result of its normal work. Seicher, the hirer, the binkach or binkach mifta poto, in any case, he's exempt. He's only liable for negligence and theft, but not for when the animal dies of natural consequences. So he's not defrauded the owner of any money. He's liable for a chatos. Shoyel, the michayev, who is liable for when it dies of its own accord. And now he's saying that it died as a result of its work, for which he's exempt, and that was his false oath to defraud the original owner of his money. But Osham, therefore, he has to bring an Osham offering. And so it goes on. They have a case where the hire is liable for an Osham, and the borrower is liable for a chatos. Could go and say Nignavon, for example, it was stolen. But when they said it died in a natural way. The hirer is liable because he's liable for theft and loss. He's saying it died in a natural way, which is exempt. Therefore, he has to bring an Osham. So the borrower is liable both for it being stolen and for dying natural causes. He's liable for a chatos offering. What does it teach us? This excludes Rabbi Ami, the Omar, who says, Rabbi Ami says that any